Welcome, everyone. My name is Eva Kubu, and I'm the Associate Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development and the Director of the Grad Futures Initiative at the Graduate School. Thank you for joining us at the Engage 2020 conference, the first of its kind conference on innovation and entrepreneurship at Princeton. Just a few housekeeping details before we begin. To optimize your viewing, please select full screen or theater mode. At the end of the moderated session, we'll take a few questions from the audience. Kindly submit those via the poll module. Since this conference is all about innovation and entrepreneurship, I'd like to begin by saying to all the graduate students in the audience that I believe that all of our graduate students are entrepreneurs at heart, because each and every day they're at the forefront of creating new knowledge and accelerating discovery. The newly launched Grad Futures Professional Development at Princeton prepares graduate students with the professional skills and competencies they need for success across all fields of endeavor and provides on-ramps to a diverse array of professional pathways, including entrepreneurship. We work closely with dozens of campus partners, including our co-sponsor of today's event, the Keller Center. The Keller Center's eLab program offers a specialized entrepreneurship curriculum, an intensive summer accelerator, an academic year incubator, mentorship, funding, and a collaborative co-working space to help students turn their ideas into viable, scalable startup ventures. Today's session also represents a collaboration between the university and a wonderful community partner that's just a short walk from the eLab. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors at the Princeton Public Library for joining us to ensure this event was available to all members of the broader Princeton community. As our guest speaker and our graduate student moderators of today's event can attest, the quality and diversity of the local Princeton food scene, along with the diverse and discerning tastes of its residents, make it the ideal test market for entrepreneurs in the food and beverage industry. I'm delighted to introduce our moderators, Princeton University graduate students Gideon Liu and Nathaniel Banks. Both are Masters of Architecture students and founders of the Crumpet Society, a fast food venture launched through the Keller Center's eLab program that aims to reinvent the crumpet for the 21st century, transforming it from the quintessential British pastry to a trendy commuter food, using locally sourced ingredients, sustainable packaging, and a variety of sweet, savory, vegan, and gluten-free options. They're also leveraging their architectural training to establish a network of micro-stores. Now it's my honor to introduce today's guest speaker, beverage entrepreneur Ben Weiss. In 2009, Ben founded the antioxidant beverage company, Bai, in the basement of his townhouse in Princeton, not far from our campus. Then, starting with the Princeton community as his initial test market, he quickly built it into the fastest growing brand in the industry. With Bai, Ben led what he calls a bevolution against the giant soda companies by delivering great tasting drinks without loads of sugar and artificial ingredients. In 2017, Dr Pepper Snapple Group acquired Bai for $1.7 billion. Now, Ben is continuing his bevolution with Crook & Marker, the world's first fully USDA organic or alcoholic beverage portfolio. Crook & Marker launched nationally in early 2019 and is now a leading brand in the better-for-you alcoholic beverage category, achieving triple-digit sales growth while rapidly expanding its roster of major retail partners. We're excited to have Ben join us for this conversation with Gideon and Nathaniel about his new book, Basementality, which describes the mindset that empowered Ben to turn his vision into reality. He'll also share his advice for those following their own entrepreneurial path, particularly amid today's economic uncertainties. Please join me in welcoming Ben Weiss.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you, Eva. Hi, Ben. I'm Gideon.
Hi.
I'm Nathaniel. It's a pleasure to meet you.
I made sure to read your book last week, Basementality, and I really enjoyed it. I think it gives a sort of in-depth examination on all the decisions you made throughout every stage of Bice growth. And I also think, like, as someone who's trying to start my own food venture, that it's really an essential read, and it gives so much stuff that I find very relatable, even at an early stage, and things that I can look forward to sort of struggling with as I develop my business further. So for those who aren't really familiar with your story, could you tell us a little bit about your time working in the coffee industry and developing some various beverages for 15 years prior to Bai, and how that led you eventually to developing that product?
Sure. First off, thank you both for having me here. I like to think of that book that you just held up as a love story. I hope it wasn't too tough of a read. I think it's a pretty modest book that had, really took you through the life of an entrepreneur and a mentality of an entrepreneur, really from very humble beginnings. And my whole career in coffee, I like to say, started with coffee breath kisses that my mother gave me as an 8-year-old when she would come home late at night from dinner. I would wait up nervously waiting for her to get home, and I'd watch the car turn the corner. I'd see the headlights, and I was just so happy that she was there, that she was safe. And then I'd run into my room and I'd fake sleeping, and she'd come in and she'd give me a kiss, and I smelt the coffee on her breath. I honestly believe that made an emotional connection with me and coffee. And then that same woman, maybe 10 years later, suggested that I go to Montreal while I was in college in Boston to visit this new, and again, this is in the 90s, so coffee was just kind of emerging on the scene. And she told me to go check out a coffee shop in Montreal. And I walked into this coffee shop, and I just, the scent and the aroma of fresh roasted coffee and the green bean burlap sacks sitting on the floor, it just was so romantic. It just hit me in the face, and I knew that this was an industry that I wanted to be a part of. So it was really very, very modest and humble beginnings. I just wanted to, at that point, I just wanted to open up a coffee bar. And I set out to travel throughout Europe, backpacking, trying to understand the coffee culture on that side of the pond. I know you're from there, Nathaniel.
Yeah.
But, and then bring some of that learning back here, again, with modest intentions at that point in time to just open up a coffee shop. Mm-hmm. And then I took my college degree and I went and worked in coffee shops, sweeping floors and handing out flyers and doing everything that you need to do in a startup. With the hope that I had some relationships that I built up in school of people who would potentially loan me some money to go do this. And when that fell through, as it often does, because people at the end of the day, when rubber hits the road, they might be a little bit more hesitant to live up to those commitments, understandably. It just kind of led me off in different directions, but I was always around coffee and beverages, and 30 years later, Bai is born, and the rest is kind of history.
So what made you pivot necessarily from just sticking very strictly to coffee to something that is, I believe, sort of the prototype for Bai was originally working with the outer coatings of coffee.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
Well, you mentioned a buzzword that I use a lot, especially in what I call year zero. You do these pivots. Usually I think there's 3 or 4 critical ones that you have to make because nobody gets it right out of the gate. Pivots to me are what define the entrepreneurial journey. And I could tell you what my pivots were with Bai in my year zero. But, to answer your question, my coffee journey led me to really the outer surroundings of the coffee bean. And I knew that coffee fruit was being discarded. I knew it was polluting the waterways in these faraway places. And it was also being used in nutraceuticals for its anti-aging, but it was never used in beverage. So really, I just wanted to create a beverage using coffee fruit as a delivery of antioxidants. I felt antioxidants were kind of the agent of had just gotten purchased by Coca-Cola for $4.2 billion. So I felt consumers trusted the word antioxidants, and we called it an antioxidant infusion. I don't think people knew what an antioxidant was. I don't think people necessarily cared as much that coffee fruit was loaded with antioxidants. that was one of my pivots, because I was pressing hard on the coffee fruit story early on. And then I realized what was relevant to me, being somewhat of a coffee geek, was not as relevant to the consumers who were sitting in front of a cooler and have literally 15 seconds to make a decision amongst a sea of choices. That coffee fruit story was an alienating one. People didn't know if it was that coffee was a fruit to begin with, or if it tasted like fruit, if it tasted like coffee, did it have caffeine? So there was a lot of hurdles that I put in front of a very impulsive decision. So we wound up burying that story. And that was pivot number one that I did in year zero. But anyway, our goal was just to put coffee fruit in there to deliver antioxidants, and to commercialize the process of getting coffee fruit, which is started in faraway places, but needs to be extracted and commercialized in a way where you can get it across the world in a timely, cost-effective way. And that was challenging as well. But that was really the genesis of Bai, although I don't think that is ultimately what made Bai successful.
That's very interesting. We are also very curious that at the beginning of your venture, how did you assemble your teams? And then, because from your book, you mentioned that many of them were not trained in relevant industries and they had no prior experience in sales. So what qualities did you look for back then?
I looked for people who didn't care about making money. That was a big quality because I didn't have any money to pay them. So, I mean, when we're talking early on, where do you go for those people? You go to your father, you go to your sister, you go to your brother-in-law, people who believe in the jockey as much as the horse. And I'm not kidding. I mean, it was really me and my dad running around the streets of Princeton, New Jersey, which I believe incubated one of the greatest innovations in beverage. I'm biased, pun intended, but we incubated that brand on the streets of Princeton. Olives was our first account. I am proud to say that if you go into Olives now, 10 years later, it's the same 6 feet of shelf space that I, haggled for and promised Adam, the owner, that I wouldn't let him down. And I set up my folding table and I introduced consumers to the brand and worked really hard in what I call rooting the brand, and it stayed rooted. I mean, 10 years later, I'm amazed at how much shelf space he has committed to that drink. But really, it was a band of rules, rebels, and randoms. Anybody who, was willing to tether themselves to a big idea that nobody else saw. And I'm not just talking about a 5-calorie drink that tasted good and didn't use artificial ingredients, because quite frankly, early on, it wasn't a 5-calorie drink. It was a mid-calorie drink. So those early days where me and my dad are, grabbing product, putting it in the trunk of the car, storing everything in Route 1 storage center, and driving it around Princeton and writing up invoices and doing samplings, that was a mid-calorie drink. That had 17 grams of sugar and 70 calories per serving. You have a lot of choices when you're a mid-calorie drink. As a consumer, they can choose amongst a variety. So it was because of being so intimate with the consumer in Princeton, New Jersey, alongside people that trusted me and were as committed and passionate about the product, that we made our second big pivot, which was I took the sugar out. I realized pretty quickly that people were looking at it. They liked the packaging. They liked the name. They trusted the antioxidant message on the front. They turned it. They found the coffee fruit story, which I buried on the back. They thought it was interesting when they found it, as opposed to me kind of forcing it down on them. And by finding that interesting nugget of the coffee fruit, I think they truly did talk about it to other people. But what they were doing is they're saying, okay, well, it's got sugar. So they would put it back. So the two I saw that they were looking for was sugar and artificial sweeteners. So I knew that we had to go to work and create a low-calorie version of this, which became Bai 5, without using artificial sweeteners. And I like to say when we did that, we stumbled upon the answer to the diet dilemma, and that's where the brand just went like that.
And you'd say that was the innovation that really made Bai the success it was. And just wondering, so when buy was,
And, I wouldn't have gotten there had I not pivoted, because that was my first, incarnation of the product.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to that. Like whenever we're trying to develop anything, you think that something's going to sell for one reason, then you realize you test it in the market, and then you'll find the changes you make actually are the biggest, most important things you do, rather than the initial idea sometimes.
Right, right. And then you always find out the customer has their own way to engage with your product. You thought they're going to do this way, they are focusing on something else. So actually, I'm very curious that how did you find out what your customers were looking for? Did you just stand by, or did you had some kinds of survey method?
So I have this theory on the beverage space. They intentionally, and I say they, it's really the three, right? It's Coke, Pepsi, Dr Pepper Snapple Group. And I say that because they own the route to market, right? Now they manufacture a bunch of legacy brands that nobody wants, but they own the route to market, which is critical. And you've got it's a balance of disrupting the very people that you need in order to make a name for yourself in the beverage space. So I'm sorry, but what was your question? Because now I went off on a tangent, but what were you saying?
I was asking, how did you do your initial customer surveys to find out what they like and not like?
So what I was getting at is that they intentionally leave the barriers of entry open for people like me, entrepreneurs out of their basement, to engage with consumers on a very intimate way and innovate, because innovation from top down in the beverage space really doesn't exist. I actually feel they don't have permission to innovate, because consumers don't want anything that comes out of Atlanta or comes out of Purchase or comes out of Plano. They are looking for people like me to come up with those drinks and then fight the fight with the route to market to bring it to them. But during the early years, Gideon, I'm right there, way more nimble than them, at the point of thirst, listening to, and they're trying to prop up legacy brands. So they're kind of half listening to what the consumer wants, almost forcing products on them. And then you have, and it's not just me, I mean, there were great better for you options that were always to my left and to my right, whether it be Vita Coco, Body Armor, there was a bunch of them that just went into the graveyard that are still good brands, but they're there because they couldn't figure out how to navigate through the distribution network. But there is a contingency of, I think you would call them new age brands, or they like to call them new age brands, but they're really better for you versions or alternatives to the legacy brands that they're selling. And we kind of have our ear to the ground. And, I didn't see, a Coke rep or a Pepsi rep next to me when I was, at that folding table, asking consumers, hey, what do you think of this? Listening to how they reacted to the antioxidant message, how they reacted to the coffee fruit message, how they viewed the sugar and the artificial sweeteners. So I was kind of right there. And it was so intimate. I just needed that customer. Like, my livelihood was that customer. So I wanted to get the right product in their hands as quick as possible. And that one pivot of going from buy to buy, one of the things I pride ourselves on is, it took us literally 6 weeks to come up with the Buy 5 platform. In 6 weeks of being out there, I'm like, okay, we got to fix this. That would be an 18-month study.
Exactly. So one thing I've noticed is you're clearly very passionate about the product, especially when it was starting up, and like listening to how the market accepts it and how to pivot. But when you start expanding your business and bringing in new people, I wonder, how can you translate that passion to the expanding business as it continues to grow? Like, how do you develop that brand culture?
It's hard, and I always say, you either dream alongside me, and if you do, I will fight so hard for you. But if I'm dreaming for you, if you're intrigued by my dream, but you really don't see what I see, you don't share the vision, and you're not tethered to that vision, because people use something that they're not used to drinking. But you got to be tethered to that vision. And if you're not, I'm kind of just dreaming for you. And that's tiring. And you go through a lot of situations where you have to test really the pulse on everybody and say, why are you here? Because for me, the minute you told me I was in the beverage industry, you know, I'd be like, I don't know what that is. I didn't come for that. That's not why I'm here. For me, it was always about a bevolution. It was like wronging a right. You know, that was always the bigger idea. And that's what we would tell you to.
Could you elaborate on that quickly? What you mean by a bevolution?
Right.
Well, the beverage industry is so vast, right? It's everywhere. It's so big. And yet, show me the study that says there should be that much sugar on the shelves, whether it be, obviously soda gets the bulk of it. But I mean, I think a worse category is the tea category. I mean, it makes it seem like it's good for you, but I mean, there's as much sugar in a lot of these teas as there is in soda. You know, now I'm finding in the alcohol space, the worst of all the offenders are the beers and the spirits who don't even put the sugar or nutritional content on a can or on a box. I mean, imagine that. You know, I'm in a business now where we have competitors that have 70 grams of sugar and 700 calories in a 24-ounce can. And you don't have the option of turning it and seeing that and deciding whether or not you want to drink it. And it's not on the can and it's not on the box. So that's the evolution today, and that's where we kind of took it. But it's all about, all of these beverages exist because routes to market really prop them up. So it was really about, you know, we use the word fight a lot. I mean, it wasn't like I was punching people in the nose, and you know, this was a fight, a mental warfare to say, hey, listen, if you're going to marginalize this, I know I need you, and I did need these distributors. I mean, without them, there's no buy. And thank God we had Dr Pepper Snapple Group, and it was led by a guy by the name of Larry Young, their CEO, who was willing to allow us to disrupt him. So you got to manage your way through that network. You got to kind of have a little bit of a fight in you. And in order to have that fight, you got to have a vision that you almost take personally, right? And you're talking to a guy who loved soda growing up. I mean, I mean, I want soda in my life today, but I haven't had it in years. So it's writing, you know, that it's how do you in a scalable way get a better for you product? Because listen, Bai wasn't the only one. We might have figured out how to make it taste really good with artificial ingredients, but that wasn't patentable. We might have figured it out first, but I certainly knew that the next Bai was in somebody else's basement. So, you know, there's other great, better for you beverages that are fighting this fight, but they're also, you know, they're less committed. You know, they might just be in the beverage game, you know, just looking for an exit. That was never, even though we exited, the irony of it, you know, the goal was never to sell it to a soda company.
You mentioned that Bai was started off from Princeton. So how did you decide which market to focus on when you launched Bai? And then why were Princeton and New York City the right places to start? And how did you go about expanding those markets?
Yeah, Gideon, I don't know if they were the right markets to start. I know Princeton was. I mean, we honestly, I'm not just saying it because I'm probably speaking to a lot of either students or residents from the area. Honestly, we had an intimate relationship with Princeton.
Right.
Kids grew up there. My kids were a part of the business. We do communiversity every year. I mean, I spent so much time on the campus of Princeton University with the brand. You know, we had our retailers who were willing to bring us in. Be patient.
Right.
So Princeton very much was the right place to start this. And we're very fortunate that I lived in such a perfect environment to launch a brand. When we went to New York, that was me thinking probably beyond my riches. I don't know if I was ready for New York when I went to New York. And quite frankly, I don't know if you're ever ready for New York in the beverage space. I'm not sure that's a market you could ever make money in. But it is a key market. But it doesn't have to be your first market. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of beverage entrepreneurs make. They try to get distribution in New York City right out of the gate, and that is ruthless.
So what was the challenges in New York City? What made that such a difficult market to get into?
Well, you know, finding a distributor is tough. there are, you know, only a few that can scale it, and they don't pay attention to small young brands. And if they do, and when they start to, they take it, you know, they take advantage of small young brands. I mean, you have to, you know, one of the things we kind of prided ourselves on is we had to sign a lot of distribution contracts, and we said no a lot more than we said yes. Because if you sign the piece of paper that they put in front of you, good luck. I mean, you're at their mercy. So, you know, you wind up with very bizarre routes to market. I mean, I had a Korean distributor that literally were just 3 guys on bicycles. And they did a great job, but they scaled to what 3 guys on bicycles scaled. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you go to, you know, we had a dairy distributor that we used to be on the milk trucks at like 2 o'clock in the morning making deliveries. And, you know, that didn't happen because they didn't own the coolers. And then we went to a natural food distributor. I mean, you go through all, I mean, listen, it's the stories you talk about years later. And they're endearing. I remember that, you know, that distributor had his offices were in a karaoke. I mean, the best meetings we ever had, but we weren't going to attack New York that way. So it's just, you know, they become the endearing stories that you talk about later, but oh my God, it sucks New York sucks the life out of you. Mm. And so what we did is we kind of built the business around New York. We were in Fairfield, Connecticut. It was a hot spot for us early on, very manageable. And yet you were kind of hitting New York because they all kind of worked in New York and you were building a brand, but I wasn't dealing with the chaos of the city. Mm. So yeah, we kind of, you know, set up a perimeter around New York. Philadelphia became a big, big market for us. Mm. Yeah, so you learn these things. You know, I was like that wide-eyed entrepreneur in the beverage space that wanted to do New York, except I was willing to do all the work. So I was the guy that got all the parking tickets. I'm paying more parking tickets than I was making, you know, and I realized the struggles on a very micro level that presents, and I just kind of pivoted. So I always say that I was the right entrepreneur at the right time with enough wins and losses in my experience being an entrepreneur my whole life that I was ready for buy. You know, I was ready for the challenge, and I just avoided the big, big mistakes early on that a lot of entrepreneurs make in the beverage space. And usually when you kind of step into that pothole, it's hard to get out. It's very difficult to get out. And I just kind of went around them enough that I stayed in the game with a really great product. And then we just started to build momentum. And a couple of pivots along the way, and there you go.
And what do you mean by those mistakes? I'm really curious.
What are the big mistakes?
Yeah.
Signing dead contracts. Because you're so focused on getting distribution that you just put the paper in front of me. If I got Honickman, or if I got Dr Pepper, or if I got, you know, big distributors, it's like you wave a flag. We're there. Look what we got. A lot of people think that if they raise a lot of money, that's a win. Wow, look, we just raised $15 million, but they gave away 40% of their. I mean, so it's like the big mistakes that people view as wins, they're not wins. You know, I raised $60 million of other people's money, a lot of whom are from the Princeton area, right? To bed with that on my shoulders every night. It's a chapter in the book, $60 million shoulders. I only raised money when I needed it. And I didn't raise more than I needed. Now, we ultimately raised a lot of money because it was a rocket ship at a certain point and you had to fuel the rocket ship. But people, that's how you raise money. That's a good use of the proceeds. We were a $120 million brand in year 4 with only a 9% aided brand awareness. So nobody knew who we were. I mean, we kind of snuck up on the industry. That's another thing. Another pothole is entrepreneurs think I'll just throw money at it, marketing. And they're just marketing to empty shelves. They haven't built up distribution, and now they're marketing to empty shelves. So what we did was we spent time in these markets and we went deep. So, you know, things we would get, I mean, if you've been, those was a perfect example. We went into Wegmans, you know, you would see my dad had coolers in there. early on. We had no right having that kind of presence. The whole time, we had no right owning pallet drops in as a young brand. But, you know, local, we work the market. If we got a pallet, we would do samplings until that pallet was off the floor. I mean, we owned the pallet. So a lot of entrepreneurs will just drop a pallet and say, all right, let it fly. And it just doesn't work that way. You gotta, hold the consumer's hand over to the pallet. You gotta educate them on the brand and hope they come back.
So at the beginning, sort of the very beginning, what would you say you were spending most of your resources on? Were you spending on like developing the product itself, ingredients wise, manufacturing it, working that out, distribution? What would you say was the main focus at the early stages?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I always say, we didn't spend a lot of money in marketing. COGS could bankrupt you. Right, so you got to be careful with your cost of goods, especially because the vessel and the manufacturing tolling charges are, call it 90% a year, and freight. So there are three big buckets in COGS that can really, drag you down. That is always going to be a big expense, and you always have to stay in front of it because you got to build in anticipation of the volume. So COGS. And then it's about base costs. It's about, we had over 450 employees at a certain point. So you hire a lot of people.
And in terms of like, so when I remember in the book, you stated that your first sort of batch was like 15,000 bottles with Bai. And that doesn't sound like a very large quantity, especially if you're competing against really massive brands. How did you sort of compress those early costs of manufacturing to make it profitable when you're producing in small quantities?
So I'll give you a little inside info. Bai was never profitable. It wasn't the goal. Bai was a rocket ship that we were fueling the rocket ship. It worked, and I obviously don't regret it. Because I was so bullish. I mean, we were first to market with the answer to the diet dilemma. And for us, it was about scale. So we weren't as acutely concerned about margin until, quite frankly, year 5. And that was okay, looking back, because we were able to raise money at really good valuations and ultimately reward our investors. And then at year 5, you can really negotiate your vendors, but it wasn't about that. Now in my business today, it's very different, and it's very much about COGS.
Right. We are also trying to figure out this part.
What's that?
We are also trying to figure out this part, the production part, because we just literally started out this summer, and then we kind of started the same route. We are in front of the coffee shop, the local coffee shop, Sacred Coffee, to have our first sample delivering to our customers. And then we are trying to cut our costs for renting the commercial kitchen and for buying those ingredients. And it's a lot at this stage.
Yeah, I think for us, we focused on proof of concept, especially, I'm assuming, how old is your business?
Literally done this summer is when we started. So it's
a few months.
Honestly, I would spend a little bit less time worrying about all that. You'll figure all that stuff out in time, and scale is only going to help you figure it out. I would spend all the time in, what does it mean to disrupt the crumpet world, right? And get proof of concept. So for us, it was all about, we had this 80-20 rule. Like if I got Target as a young brand, there's no way I can control 1,800 stores. I don't have the manpower. I will never have the manpower to do it. That's why you need the route to market. But so I will fail when I'm in those stores as a young brand. We did fail. But what we did was we focused on what we could control. And we can control the top 20% of them. I could control 360 stores and what we did was we just over-indexed in those stores. Like we put Bai in a position where you thought it was in year 4 or year 5, and that consumer was reacting to a brand in a way that it normally doesn't, especially because the brand was on trend and it was delivering what they were looking for. that 20% I can control. And when the buyer looks at the overall numbers, those 20% carry the rest, the 80%, which are failing, quite frankly. Because I can't ask a distributor in Iowa to do the same thing in that target. It'll never happen. But I could distract the buyer with the top 20% if you over-index that much. And in doing so, you're now creating a proof of concept. Because for us, it was also about premium. So we were trying to say, you know, pay twice, you would pay for a vitamin water, right? And it rewards everybody in the system, the distributor and the retail, because the consumer sees the value in that premium price. So we had to build out proof of concept for that. So the first couple of 3 years, it was how do we build that out in up and down the street business, then in club, mass, grocery. And, you know, we did it with Costco. We did it with the Olives of the world in up and down the street. We did Costco's in club. We did it with Wegmans. You find your retail partner. Wegmans was our retail partner in grocery. You know, Target was our retail partner in mass. Costco was a huge retail partner for us in club. And then you just say, hey, listen, this pricing matrix works. We could be premium across the board. You know, you can still get your best value at Costco. Look at the volumes there when you pay attention to it versus, you know, how they sell at Target. So it's about figuring all that. And then when you figure all that out, you actually have a game plan where you can then sell on. And for us, COGS were less important. And I'm not saying be ignorant to that, but it was less important because we weren't overextending the brand. We were still doing a lot of that in regional basis. I was with Costco regionally. I wasn't with them nationally. I was with Wegmans, which is a regional grocer, right? I was with Target nationally, but I only cared about the places that I could touch regionally, right? So that strategy was very disciplined. Even though I'm saying we didn't care about COGS, don't think we weren't very disciplined.
Mm.
One final question. So you started by following the financial crisis of 2008, and now you're sort of moving in with Crook and Marker in the COVID pandemic. So it seems you're not afraid to like set up new brands in what are generally considered difficult times. So what gives you the confidence in developing businesses during these periods? And are there any tips you may have for anyone else wishing to do so?
You know, listen, I didn't plan it that way. It just worked out. Who knows what my next business is going to face, but they never posed a threat. You know, in fact, I think the financial crisis in 2009 helped me raise money. I had a lot of people in the medical field that were just looking to deploy resources outside of the operating room. You know, they were like, oh, if I'm not in the operating room making money, I don't make money. And, you know, we just found a little niche because we engaged with a couple of them and it just kind of worked. So that the money kind of flowed. That wasn't an issue. So capital raising during the crisis was never an issue. I think people find beverage to be an affordable luxury. I mean, I think people are always trying to drink better. So they're willing to spend there. Yeah, so I don't know if I have, you know, the answer to that other than I think beverage to a degree is a bit resilient to what the economy is doing around it.
Okay. I think it's
so
time for us to move.
Today, our audience are most likely young entrepreneurs and students. So I wonder, when they try to start up their own business, would you recommend them to consider applying for an accelerator or incubator program while in the school to get like kind of a headshot to get their venture take off? Because it's safe to test your idea with the mentors and the funding opportunities.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I caught the question there.
I would say, would you recommend them to apply to this kind of accelerator program in school?
Sure. I mean, I honestly, for me, my degree and my learnings, quite frankly, were on the streets, as you say, just being intimate with consumers. There's no better way to accelerate an idea than to put it right in front of people and be okay hearing how they react to it. And also being steadfast in what your vision is. Sometimes maybe you don't see it yet. So it's not like you pivot to where the consumer's at, because sometimes the consumer's just not there yet. So you've got to have that balance. But for me, it's all about in the beverage industry, and I would imagine in food as well. Being at the point of thirst is invaluable. It's where the rubber hits the road, and it's quite frankly where the big guys aren't spending a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think it's time for us to move on to the Q&A component. So I'll go and start asking for the first question, which is, what does better for you brands mean? And how do you recommend marketing towards these customers?
Yeah, I mean, listen, better for you for me means, can you develop something without leaning on sugar and calories? There are other, listen, I think compromise is better for you. Like drinking water is better for you. Drinking seltzer is better for you. So there's a degree of compromise that's just better for you, but that's not very innovative. I truly believe that, consumers ultimately are looking for big, bold flavors that they can trust and or functionalities that they can trust. So better for you is just having a functionality that's just not empty calories. Soda for so many years has just provided empty calories. There's just nothing there nutritionally. So it's not hard to be better than that, but it's hard to scale something that's better for you.
And another question is, how did you get your first case of drinks manufactured?
How did I get my first taste of the drinks?
Yes, first case of drinks, how and where did you get it manufactured?
Oh, how did I get manufactured my first cases?
Mm-hmm.
The first, we went through, I want to say three co-packers before we ultimately landed on the manufacturer who scaled alongside the brand. And that's when we became a high acid aseptic brand, which didn't exist. That technology didn't exist in the States. So we had to build it as we were going. But prior to landing there, the first manufacturer was a bottler, hot fill bottler in California. And then I'm like, I don't like the idea of filling 195 degrees into a plastic bottle. It's BPA free. I just feel like there was opportunity stuff to leak into it. So that was really, and then I was like, and then we got to get closer to the East Coast. The shipping was killing us, but at the end of the day, the reason we went to high acid aseptic is so that you can have a vessel that doesn't receive product at 195 degrees. It actually receives it cold, which was important to me because it also doesn't cook the product and the flavor and the better for you components. When you hot fill vitamins in a drink, there aren't many vitamins left in that drink. When you aseptically fill, it's a completely different story. It's a flash pasteurization, and it gets filled in a aseptic environment, cold. So I just felt like it was a better way to deliver a product, and it didn't exist, so we had to build it as we went.
So another question we have is, did you have a worry that Princeton was biased because they knew you already and were close to the story?
No, because at the end of the day, I don't know, the brand, when you put it in Wegmans on Route 1, it might say local somewhere, but it's not like, I had a story of me and my kids on the bottle, and, running around, Mercer Park. You didn't. It wasn't in your face that this was a local product, and we saw early on that it was when you interrupt a consumer in a meaningful way, this brand was performing at a different level while selling at a premium price. So maybe super early on when we had a few accounts and I decided, hey, I'm taking my show to New York. Yeah, maybe I was drinking my own Kool-Aid at that time and thought, I could survive there. And maybe it was because of the attention we were getting from our local community. But we quickly realized as we kind of sprawled into Pennsylvania and other places that this brand, had some serious legs to it.
So next question is, did you do city or location specific testing before launching the product in different areas?
What kind of testing?
Just product testing.
Did you do a trial in an area before you officially launched?
No, a focus group or product testing in my life. I mean, listen, I think everything early on in year zero is a test, except I'm just kind of I'm not asking questions. I'm selling my dream and in a way gauging the reception. So yeah, I guess I do test things, but I've never formalized focus groups or any sort of product testing. Again, for me, I always operated like it was a race. You know, the next buy was in somebody else's basement. And that's the nature of the beverage industry. So for me, it's about charging hard and changing tires while you're going 70 miles an hour down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And what were, like, I know you've mentioned earlier that marketing was not something you invested too heavily in early on, but what were the most successful marketing tactics that you believe helped make your brand take off?
The best marketing that this brand take off without question was wearing hairnets and getting behind tables at Costco roadshows, 4-day roadshows. They are grueling 10-hour per day roadshows that you see them all the time if you go to Costco. And everybody typically runs from them because they are grueling. It's 40 hours of nonstop, you know. And you're lucky if you make money doing it. You often lose a lot of money. But we embraced that because we were so confident that if you gave me, 5,000 mouths a weekend I can get this product into, I was going to sell 500 cases. And that was our goal. Every roadshow we'd say that, and it grew and it became such a big part of our culture. We would, at some point, we'd have 20 of these going on across the country, and we'd have them competing against each other, and we'd spend $10,000 in each one of those roadshows. And hopefully we'd break even or make some money doing it, but it was the best paid for sampling. Me, that was the best marketing that I ever did. And we've done Super Bowl ads. We had sponsored Zach Brown concert tours. But for me, the biggest and the best and the most impactful were those Costco roadshows.
And how do you recommend handling buyers that may not see the benefits in the product?
That is a great question. And it's not just buyers, it's distributors, it's buyers, it's your own salespeople. It's anybody who tries to marginalize the dream. And that's what they do. By the way, it's set up, whether they do it intentionally or unintentionally. Everybody doesn't see what you see, and they will marginalize it. And I think it's the ability of the entrepreneur to fight that marginalization. So we go into some accounts, like early on, we went to Walmart, and they called us down to Bentonville. The buyer was over the moon with the product, came in drinking it. His fiance is telling him knows everything about the brand, and she did. And I'm like, this is a layup. This is Walmart. And he said, I'm going to make you $100 million business. He said, but you got to sell for $1 a bottle, and you got to go through my warehouses. And that just wasn't going to work. I said, we're building our own route to market with these DSD distributors. I'm committed to them. And there's no way I could sell this drink for $1. It's $1.99. And we said no. And that's one way of dealing with people who don't see your vision. You literally, you leave the room. And I'm not saying you slam the door behind you. You do it in a way where they're like, oh, wow, that guy is passionate about his brand. And we did that. And I remember doing that with my president at the time, Ken Kurtz, who is this seasoned beverage industry veteran. And he put his arm around me as I was walking out that door, and he said, I've never met a founder who just said no to Walmart. And he goes, I'm proud of you. And he said, and I don't know if he realized how poetic this was. He said, don't worry, we'll get Target. And sure enough, we get Target. Target leans in. I called them our retail partner. They are very much a partner. Walmart wasn't willing, nor probably should they have, because they're the biggest, baddest retailer in the world. They weren't willing to be our partner at that time. Target was. We put all our attention to Target, and then Target just explodes, and then Walmart comes. And Walmart became our biggest customer, which they should, but they came on our terms. and they sold it for $1.99. Actually, they sold for $1.98, penny cheaper. And it was a great, because Walmart could bankrupt the company as well. So, sometimes we've worked on us one facing. We'll take one facing and 7,000 stores in Safeway. Mm-hmm. One facing. Now that's money. That's 7,000 cases. That's real money. But the brand will perform like you just gave it one facing. It's not going to do anything. It's not on anybody's shopping list. They're not going, I got to buy. Nobody knew we needed this. And if they weren't willing to give us this, then we weren't going to live with this. We would leave. And that's another pothole that a lot of entrepreneurs in the beverage walk into, because one facing, it's real money if you have 7,000 doors. That was short-term greedy, and we need to put the brand in a position to be successful.
Okay, so last two questions, I guess. First of all, did you have to get a claim review done before printing the product?
Well, we didn't make any claims, so I'm not sure what claims anyone's referring to. But if you're making claims, yeah, you definitely have to get a claim review. But we have not, because the non-alc side is governed by the FDA, so very much so. In the world I live in today, the TTB governs the alcohol space. It's a bit like the Wild Wild West. Mm-hmm. But in by days, we didn't make any claims.
Mm. And last one, in terms of being able to renegotiate with investors, how did that change after 5 years?
Renegotiate with investors? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I understand the question. We never really renegotiated with investors. I was constantly fundraising. So we were constantly bringing on new investors.
I see.
But I'm not sure, I don't know about renegotiating with them. And I'm not sure I follow the question.
Well, we've got one more, I guess we can add in. Sorry, because that went a bit fast. What, according to you, should be the considerations regarding timing of moving focus from revenues to margins?
That's a tough question, because like I said, I don't know. Every business has a different blueprint. I could use the vitamin water blueprint. I had it, and that a lot of people that invested in Buy were in and around vitamin water, including their marketing officer. So I just knew better than to use their blueprint, which is very much about 360 marketing, give away shares to a lot of celebrities and make them owners and influencers. That wasn't going to work with Buy or the millennial consumer. I wouldn't sit here and say, hey guys, although I did give you guys that advice with the crumpets, that may not be so focused on your COGS. I think the plan with any one of these businesses is figure out your proof of concept in year zero. You have however many pivots you have to make. If you don't come out of year zero with a proof of concept as to why your brand can scale, then I would reconsider year one.
Right. That's a really useful recommendation.
That's a great final note. And I think we can now pass it back to Eva for some closing remarks. It's been an absolute pleasure to be talking with you. And thank you very much for coming.
Go disrupt the crumpet industry, baby. I'll eat them.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for your candor, your authenticity as always, and most of all for your practical advice for our audience. Gideon and Nathaniel, great job. Ben, you said you were the right entrepreneur at the right time, and in your words, at the point of thirst. So on that note, and in the spirit of the Bevolution, cheers to you and to all those entrepreneurs in the audience who will go on to disrupt and invent other industries. To our audience, thank you for joining us. To our sponsors, the Princeton Public Library and the Keller Center, thank you so much. We hope to see everyone again tomorrow at the final day of the Engage Conference. For more information about Ben's book, please visit basementality.org. And for more information about Princeton and our innovation efforts, please visit innovation.princeton.edu. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Don't know what to do now.